The following program is a special presentation of the Big Ten Network, produced in association with the University of Wisconsin.
The University of Wisconsin-Madison was home to some of the most furious and fierce anti-war protests during the Vietnam War. While much of the student anger was directed at the U.S. government and university administration, returning veterans were often the target of campus anger, or were simply ignored. Flash forward nearly 40 years, and now UW-Madison has the reputation of one of the most military-friendly schools in the nation. What has it done to earn that reputation, and what does that exactly mean? We'll find out when we talk to two student veterans and a retired military officer who now serves as Veterans Service Coordinator. Next, during office hours. Hi, I'm Ken Goldstein, Professor of Political Science here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. In a few minutes, I'll discuss the current climate on campus toward the military with two UW students who served overseas and are now enrolled on campus. Joining me now to talk about how the climate in Madison has become more veteran-friendly is John Bechtol, Assistant Dean of Students for Veterans Affairs. John is a retired Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army and former commander of ROTC at UW-Madison. He served 21 years of active duty with the United States Army and 3 years in the National Guard before taking over the ROTC programming and assuming his current role. John, welcome to Office Hours.
Thanks, Ken.
Although you obviously weren't around here in the late 1960s and early 1970s, it's certainly the case that the University of Wisconsin was a focus of anti-war protests and had an image as a place that was anti-military. Could you speak to that a little bit and some other reasons why UW might have had that reputation even in more current years?
Well, I certainly think it had a reputation. In fact, my posting previous to coming here to Wisconsin was at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and when I found out about my upcoming assignment to UW-Madison, a Wisconsin native and a graduate of UW-La Crosse told me how horrendous it was going to be because of how anti-military the folks were at UW-Madison. I'm happy to say that I didn't find that to be the case at all. In fact, folks bent over backwards to help veterans here on campus. As far as the climate back in the Vietnam era, the era of the protests and some other circumstances since then, such as the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, just talking to older veterans in my VFW post, you know, they felt quite strongly that they were targeted as distinct representatives of the government's foreign policy, not as individuals, but were seen and treated rather hostily by students on campus, and definitely not given any respect.
So you mentioned the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. And so many institutions in the country, Ivy League institutions, for instance, Harvard, Yale, don't have ROTC because of the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. The University of Wisconsin, there was a vote here in the late 80s, early 90s. What did that say?
Well, there was a non-binding vote held by the chancellor with all the faculty members to eliminate ROTC on campus because of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. However, you know, that policy was developed by Congress. It is not the individual services policy. I would equate it to blaming the Madison Police Department for the no smoking policy in the city. The services are simply carrying out what they've been tasked to do.
Congress changes the law, ROTC changes its policy within seconds.
Exactly.
Would be the bottom line.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about how veterans were treated before you took this job. Would it be fair to say that after the drama of the 60s and 70s, that it was more acts of omission than commission? So it wasn't necessarily the case that veterans were targeted in the 70s or 80s. They just didn't receive any of the perhaps special services that they might have needed.
Right. When I was hired in my current position, a new position last September, I did an assessment of veteran services on campus, and what I found were individuals in various departments were quite willing to help, but there's no outreach, no way of guiding the veterans to the different resources on campus. And so what we attempted to do was set up a program and actually institute this past summer where we contact incoming student veterans, meet with them during their orientation, get their veterans benefits certified earlier so that they start receiving payments earlier, get them hooked up with other resources that they may be eligible for, such as the VA hospital or the Vet Center or McBurney Disability Resource Center. They may be eligible for some accommodations there. And I would say just as important is getting them linked up with other student veterans on campus.
So, large place. There was lots of things in place, but if you just show up, there's really no way to know how to navigate them.
Yes, a good example is there is a question on the UW system application, have you served on active duty in the U.S. military? Admissions took that into account, but then that's where it ended. That information was not passed to anybody else. It was then up to the veteran to find the right person on campus to certify their veterans benefits, to go over to the VA, him or herself, and see if they're eligible, to go to the Vet Center, go to McBurney. And so what we've tried to do is we created a one-stop web page, and like I said, we do a personal outreach to every student veteran coming in and starting school at UW-Madison.
Okay. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, I want to hear a little bit about how previous Chancellor Wiley helped create the position and how you tried to be a little bit of an entrepreneur in getting the position started. So, hope everyone will stay with us as we discuss the military on the campus of University of Wisconsin-Madison. Please stay with us on Office Hours.
This program is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you have comments about this broadcast, please email them to programming@uc.wisc.edu.
For more than 100 years, the University of Wisconsin has been inspired by the Wisconsin idea,
which says the good work of the university extends to the boundaries of the state and beyond.
So the UW works hard to help build Wisconsin's economy.
Educate people of all ages.
Advance health and medicine.
And enhance the quality of life for all of us.
Hey!
The University of Wisconsin-Madison. Forward thinking.
Welcome back to Office Hours, where we're talking about the military on the campus of University of Wisconsin-Madison, or more precisely, veterans and veteran support at the University of Wisconsin-Madison with John Bechtol. John, welcome back. How did your position come about? So you had an active duty career, you were ROTC commander here, and there was, as you said, something lacking here.
Yeah. Well, I think, and this was happening outside of my knowledge, but I know that the Dean of Students, Lori Burkram, recognized that there was a growing student veteran population on campus. In fact, it had nearly doubled from 2003 to 2006. And
how many veterans do we have on campus?
Right now we have about 650 self-reported student veterans on campus.
Large number.
Yes. And, you know, she was concerned whether or not their needs were being met. Coincidentally, I often chatted with our certifying official who works in the registrar's office, and she is the one that actually works with the VA database and our own university database to certify that individuals are students and can receive their benefits. But often she would get questions from student veterans coming in asking about, you know, who do they contact to get their household goods because they're PCSing or ETSing, an acronym she didn't know about. So she often referred them over to me at Army ROTC, and I would spend time talking with the students. That was kind of a fill the gap operation, and like I said, I think because of the growing number, the Dean of Students recognized this is a population that we need to take care of.
Can you give me, aside from acronym translation, can you give me a couple other sort of, you know, specific things that you end up doing the majority of your job on helping out veterans here on campus?
Sure. Well, to start off with, you know, there is still that perception about Madison being anti-military. I contact not only the student veterans that have been admitted to UW-Madison, but also those that are denied admission, and offer them some alternatives to gaining admission to UW-Madison, whether that be through MATC, Madison Area Technical College, through Edgewood College, which is a participant in the Yellow Ribbon program, a local private college, and also find out you know, what their specific needs might be, why they think they didn't get admitted, and trying to offer some encouragement to come here to Madison. Needs as far as students arriving on campus, you know, many of our of our student veterans are a little bit older. Many of them are married, have families, and so they aren't the traditional incoming freshmen. They're looking for family housing, they're looking for child care, part-time employment. And so I try and steer them in the right direction or connect them to resources available in the area.
Is this something where you actively recruit? How are we known out in the world of the military as veterans get out of the Army and make choices?
It's very tough to advertise to military veterans leaving the service. I've received many inquiries from right here on campus. We really want student veterans in our college because we know they're going to be leaders of our students, and how do we recruit them? When a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine leaves the service, they are inundated with a bunch of information in about a 3-day time period and then sent on their way. And there really is not time to actively recruit for individual campus. We're well known within the state of Wisconsin, obviously, and many of our veterans come from out of state, but really they choose Wisconsin, I think, first for the academics, and then are happy to see that, wow, here's a central place where I can go as a veteran and find out what extra benefits I may be eligible for from the state of Wisconsin, from the federal government, and get linked up with student veterans.
Super. John, thanks for joining us in Office Hours. We're going to have two of the students you work with who served overseas and are now students here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison join us for the second 2 segments. Right. And I hope you'll all join us on Office Hours as we continue our discussion of veterans on the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Welcome back to Office Hours. I'm now joined by 2 University of Wisconsin students, Matt Moran and Ashley Kerr. Ashley served in the United States Army and Matt served in the United States Marines. Welcome both to Office Hours. You have the honor of being the first non-geeks to be on Office Hours, the first non-faculty members to be on Office Hours. Ashley, tell me a little bit about your experience. You started college. You were in the reserves. And then you got called up. And tell me a little bit about your experiences in Iraq.
Okay, after I got called up, my unit went down to Fort Shelby, or Camp Shelby, Mississippi, to train for 6 months before we deployed. And then we deployed over to Iraq and stayed there for about 16 months after a 4-month extension. And my first portion of being over there, I was called on to do convoys. So I ran convoy security and was a truck commander.
And when was this?
This was from April of 2005 to, can't do the math right now, I think about July of 2005.
So not during a mellow time for convoys in Iraq?
No, actually, yeah. At that point, it was sort of a climactic point in the level of attacks in our sector too, and in the kind of the south. There was a shift of, I guess, violence down in that area where we were during that period. So.
Let me turn to Matt.
Okay, that's fine.
So Matt, you went into the Marines right out of high school?
I know. I was in college for about a year and realized I just wasn't enjoying myself quite as much for the money my parents were paying. So I joined the Marines in 2001 and actually went to boot camp just after September 11th. And was in the infantry and deployed to Iraq in 2004 with my battalion, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines.
And were there for?
I was there from July 2004 to about March 2005.
And when did you start here at UW?
I started here, I got out in September 2005, so September 2006.
And are you a Wisconsin native?
No, I'm not. I'm from Long Island, but my mom is originally from the area.
So I want to hear sort of how both of you ended up at University of Wisconsin. So you finish your deployment in Iraq, because you're then in the reserves. You then go back to civilian life. And now you have a decision to make. What are you going to do?
Actually, it happened more like what Mr. Bechtol was talking about. I was, while I was overseas, about 3 months out, actually, right around the time that we had our extension, I was thinking about school, and I knew I wanted to go back to school. And I looked back at the old school, my first college I went to. It was a smaller college, and I had a lot more of a limited program, especially in international relations is what my major is. And I knew I wanted to do something more with my education, and actually the experience over there showed me that I should be focusing a little bit more on something more relevant. I felt like that was a need. And so I saw Madison as a close enough school to home, but a pretty prestigious school with a good program.
Any concerns about Madison? Anything? I mean, since you weren't even nearly born in the 1960s or 70s.
I really didn't know about it. And actually, I was having a conversation with my brigade commander, and I brought up that I was going to go to Madison, and he was really shocked. He was like, "Really? You want to go there? Why do you want to go there?" And I was like, "Well, you know, it's got a good program." And so I really was pretty oblivious to the reputation that they had, and I wasn't too scared by his reaction. I really still wanted to go.
And Matt, how'd you end up here?
Kind of an accident. I was actually on campus just before I went to the Marines. My uncle was running the marathon here, and the kind of electricity in the atmosphere really struck me. So it was one of the places I wanted to apply to when I got out, and happened to call one of the majors at the ROTC building on a whim, and he helped me out with the application process, and that's how I got in here.
So you knew, so you were getting out of the Marines, but you knew you wanted to continue a career in the military and go into ROTC to be commissioned then?
Well, I wasn't sure. I kind of think I still enjoyed what I was doing. You know, I was playing, you know, kind of bad guys and good guys, you know, Cowboys and Indians, but I don't know if I wanted to keep it as an available option. I was kind of exploring my options, but I talked to this major, and not only did he help me get in kind of quicker than normal students, he offered a scholarship too, so that kind of sealed the deal.
Great. We're going to take a break now. When we come back on Office Hours, I want to hear a little bit more about what the transition was like, going from a Marine base or from running convoys in Iraq to a beautiful, serene college campus at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Hope to stay with us on Office Hours.
This program is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you have comments about this broadcast, please email them to programming@uc.wisc.edu.
Welcome back to Office Hours. I'm talking with Matt Moran and Ashley Kerr, who are two UW students who served overseas in Iraq and now are at University of Wisconsin. I was at the basketball game last night, and I'll date us a little bit here with Wisconsin's big victory over Duke. And I was sort of watching, you know, the bedlam and the enthusiasm, and I was sort of thinking, knowing I was going to do this show the next day, what it would be like when you're overseas, you're in Iraq, you're in a very intense environment, and then you come back to the world where people are nervous about the last 30 seconds of a basketball game. Mm-hmm. How was that? What was that transition like for you?
Personally, I think it was a little frustrating. And it's something that's hard to really put into words, but it's kind of a day-to-day, just the way that you live your life and mentally think about what you're doing throughout the day and kind of prioritize your life. Just having to focus on academics and school and getting wrapped up in those little things really seemed sort of unimportant when I came back, not as, you know, significant as the problems I was dealing with or thinking about anyway. While I was overseas.
How quick was it between the time you left Iraq, got home, and started back at school?
I had about 2 or 3 months before I started. Actually, it was closer to about a month. We got back in the middle of July, and then obviously it started in September. So I had a little bit of a transition period, and then I think just some of the key things that like stuck out in my mind as far as like difficult to deal with was well, first I went back to live in the dorms, and so I was around a lot younger people with different life experiences, and so having to listen to their problems with, you know, day-to-day life and their friends and those little issues was kind of difficult for me to understand and to connect to. And I knew where they're coming from, but it was really hard for me to sympathize with what they were talking about.
And Matt, how about you? Your experience coming back to a college campus?
I don't know that it was quite so different than being in the barracks. In the infantry, we're not the most mature bunch, so going back to a place where people are, you know, excited about football and get wrapped up about the last 30 seconds of the game, and we were doing the same thing. We were sitting in the cafeterias in Iraq, so it wasn't too bad. Little here's and there's, but I had been home for about a year before I came back to school. So that helped too. I think more than anything, being in ROTC was maybe a little bit more of a learning curve because you're not really fully in the military like you were before. It's not quite as intense or, you know, wrapped up with some of the little things that you would be doing on day-to-day life in a military base. But I felt like it was pretty smooth. I enjoyed my transition here.
So, talk to me a little bit about your experience also at ROTC. So on the one hand, I think it would be a great way, a great middle path for you to come back to college. On the other hand, you're there with people who are 18 and going into ROTC and doing these training and classes about combat, where you've actually been in combat.
That was different. I think that was my biggest learning curve about coming to UW-Madison yeah, the Marines are a little more intense than the Army, and the Army itself is more intense than ROTC. So I think I came in thinking it was going to be more of a stricter, like kind of standard military type organization, and it is, but it isn't. So there was a big learning curve for me. It took a bit of adjusting to that. So, but you know, don't get wrapped up too much about that. You just adjust and move on.
Speak to me a little bit about that, Ashley, and also, I mean, I'm sure it's a tremendous benefit for ROTC to have folks like you and Matt who are students and obviously can deal with people who are about your age who are in ROTC, but also have had the real experience.
Actually, for the most part, I found ROTC to be my sort of escape from the rest of the campus. At least I felt that they had the same types of goals and aspirations, and if they didn't specifically understand what the Army was about yet, they will, and they were really interested in that, and so I felt that that was a good place for me to go to have that outlet. And then also I felt that the program itself showed a lot of respect for its veterans that came in, and didn't ignore the issues that we had to transition, and there were still a number of other cadets that were also veterans. So I think having a couple other veterans in the group was helpful for dealing with maybe some of the issues.
We literally have 10 or 15 seconds left. You walk around campus in your uniform. Ever an awkward moment on the University of Wisconsin-Madison?
Twice, but it was only because somebody was stopping to thank me. It's been really pretty pleasant.
Good. And you?
Sort of the same. We'll get a couple looks here and there, but I'm not sure if it's because they just haven't seen it a lot, or otherwise it's just thanking me, so it's really not no big problem.
Well, I thank you, and thank you for being on Office Hours. And thanks to all of us. Thanks to all of you. That's all our time for today. If you want to see some of our other topics we've covered, please look at us on the web at officehours.polysci.wisc.edu. From the University of Wisconsin-Madison, this has been Office Hours. Thanks for stopping by.
The preceding program was produced by the University of Wisconsin in association with the Big Ten Network.